My overwhelming support, the extension of the zones of special operation. I just have a few comments to make. One, in terms of the reduction of crime, I'm sure the House can appreciate that the X factor would be a remarkable uptick in extrajudicial killings. I'm not seeing where in any of the reports anything that can quantify or justify the reduction outside of that. So on a human rights plane, one has to consider whether or not, when we're talking about restoration of human dignity in some spaces, whether or not the lack of use of body cameras, also the idea that extrajudicial killing certainly this year has been significantly increased, police fatal killings as another way people understand it to do it, whether or not this is one of the reasons where persons will apprehend fear and feel that their human rights are under attack, especially when you have families complaining that the persons who were killed, whether it was targeted or not, is actually one of the reasons why we have a reduction and is actually bringing fear. So that is something to think about. Zones of special operations, there is a call for other communities, and given its success, one wonders if a build out and moving to another space would not have been more effective in terms of crime reduction. It never was meant to be a stopgap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members, for your participation. Let me start with the member from Portland Eastern. In terms of attributions, we are ourselves contemplating a study to be done on the zones of special operations. It has been in operations now heading into almost 8 years, and I believe it is time for an empirical review to be done, and we have started along that lines already. So we will have a review done, an empirical study done on the zones of special operations, and that will give us more information as to how we can improve this strategy. The member mentioned increase in police killings, was also alluded to by the member from St. Catherine South. And I will say this: the police force has become far more effective in doing its job. I can say with great confidence that the JCF and the JDF have mainstreamed and internalized human rights training. It is part of their doctrine. It is part of their leadership culture. And they do try, as far as they can, to protect lives, including the lives of criminals. I hear a great deal of talk about the increase in the number of police killings. And I too have my own concerns about this, because I don't want it to ever be said that, our police force is the most lethal. That's not the kind of police force that we are trying to create. But I believe that on the other side of the ledger, on the other side of the argument, we must also be concerned about the propensity of criminals to challenge the police. I don't hear anyone saying, why are these criminals shooting at the police? Why, when they are stopped, why, when they are interdicted, they decide to challenge the police. As I have said earlier, we have invested heavily in our police force to make them more effective. And the Jamaican state must never be at threat or at risk of criminals. If criminals challenge the state, they must not win. Our police officers must go home to their families safely.
That's right.
So, whilst we do have our concerns, and we have put systems in place, both internally at the leadership level, we support INDECOM and its own operations. We encourage the internal review and use of force policy in the JCF. When we meet in the National Security Council, these are matters that are discussed because we want our police force to, more than anything else, serve, protect, and preserve life. This is also a message to the criminals. Save your life, don't challenge the police. So I'm hopeful that I have put that to bed. There is, Mr. Speaker, some duplicity in the arguments presented by the opposition. First, there is a call for more technology. Where are the cameras? Both body-worn and closed-circuit cameras, Jamaica Eye. We need the greater use of technology to improve security in public spaces and improve the outcomes of interactions between the police and the citizens. And I support this fully. And to reassure the member from St. Catharines South that just, in Cabinet 2 weeks ago, we approved a major procurement of over 1,000 body-worn cameras. And this is just one in a series of such procurements to come for more cameras. So it is underway. And just to be clear to the public, there sometimes seems to be the view that you can go into a store and just pick up a camera and stick it onto the police chest. Please, these matters are, I don't want to use the term sophisticated because by now the technology is fairly standard, but it requires an ecosystem for it to work. So it's not just cameras, it is also storage, archival for retrieval. It has to be up to a certain standard that what is stored reaches evidentiary levels. There has to be a system of how these cameras are maintained should there be failure. And then there is a whole business of putting in place the fiber optic connections, because where you download physically the footage is not where you're going to store it. So it has to be transmitted, and you have to make sure that you have that connection. So there's a lot to be built out before you can deploy body-worn cameras. And I'm assuring the public that the build-out is taking place, and we have signed off on a procurement for 1,000 body-worn cameras, which is not the final amount. They will procure in batches. And so the JCF will have body-worn cameras sufficient for its members to ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the police-citizen interaction. But on the other hand, there is a reservation that somehow investing in smart technology or infrastructure will not transform the lives of citizens. The member from Eastern Portland, the thesis of his argument is that the transformation of the man does not depend on the environment in which he is. The transformation of the man is that, allow me to make my point, as I allowed all of you to make yours. The thesis is that the program should focus on the human element of the problem, improving the man, rather than focusing on infrastructure. That's the thesis of the argument. Now, Madam Speaker, it is not just a philosophical point. It is absolutely important to policy. Yes, for there to be a genuine change in how the person behaves, there has to be focus on programs that seek to change the mind. Improve behavior. No argument with that. But I encourage a member to consider that there are persons in the zones of special operations and right across our society where there has been no special investment in any program to improve their behavior or reward good behavior. They behave according to the standards and laws and expectations of the society simply because they are good citizens. Simply because they are good citizens. And this is what we miss in the debate about social transformation. We never seek to acknowledge and reward the youngster who lives in the harshest inner city community but never felt the need to take up a gun to prove his manhood. Never felt the need to join a gang. It is time that government policy shifts to supporting people who obey the law. Now, Madam Speaker, in every society, there will be persons who are deviants. And the only way to treat with deviance is to have the enforcement of the law. There are some people who we will have to support them emotionally, psychologically, yes. But we cannot compromise the law, and more importantly, the building out of the infrastructure that ensures that where crime is committed, it is detected and the perpetrators brought to justice. And that is what the zones of special operations is about. We are going into communities. We are breaking up the ecosystem of criminality. We are putting in place the infrastructure to ensure that there can be enforcement. And we are also putting in place the social interventions that will ensure that no one can have an excuse to say it is because of my social marginalization why I am in crime. And to also ensure that those people, though socially marginalized, who have not gotten involved in crime, that they are also supported. That is what the zone of special operations is. So, Madam Speaker, The member from St. Andrew Western, I consider him my brother and neighbor. His point, unlike myself.